Just for reference, this is really focused specifically on vCenter. There's a lot of cool new features with vSphere, but we're focused on VC today. So let me introduce my co-presenters up here. We have Deep.
Hey.
Oh.
Is it working?
Oh, yeah. So first, before I say, everything I say is not really true, so you can't sue us. But let me quickly introduce. Everything is true, but let me quickly introduce my co-presenters here. We have Deep up here. So if you're saying, who is this guy that thinks he's as entertaining as Bon Jovi, let me introduce who we are so you realize we're not actually that entertaining. But Deep is a group product manager on the VC team. His focus is specifically around the services that we'll talk a lot of detail about. So you'll see a lot of scale improvements and everything, and Deep will talk about that. So just in case you're wondering which of the three of us, that's him. My name is Amit Jani. My focus, I have several, but my key focus will be on the web client, and so we'll talk about that. And so that, of course, is me. And at the end of this, Justin will be up here today with us, and he's going to answer a lot of our tough questions, and you'll hear his classy English accent. So just in case you're wondering who he is.
Yeah, baby.
That's Justin. So I will briefly go through what we want to talk about. I promise you this is not a 2-hour thesis statement that we're going to go up here, but we do want to get into deep dive. And given that we want to do it in 45 to 50 minutes so that we can answer questions at the end, we will pick certain use cases that we think are most interesting. At the end, feel free to ask any question that you want. But we will quickly talk through the web client. I don't know if anyone's seen the web client with 5.0. OK. It's much better, I promise you, and we'll show you that. And we'll talk about tagging, which I think is one of the most interesting features we've introduced with 5.1. I think it'll unleash a lot of potential use cases, and we'll dive into that. And then I'm the brains, Deep is the beauty. He'll come up and he'll talk about single sign-on, installation and deployment, and, of course, performance. And so when we hit the 40-minute mark and you're like, oh, my God, these guys won't stop talking, I tell you it's worth sticking around just for the last 10 minutes because as much as we've done with features, we've done a lot of very cool things with architecture and performance, and I think you'll be very happy with what you see. So I encourage you to stick around for the last 10 minutes where we get into that. So let's dive right into it. So the first question I often get asked is, Amit, why did you introduce a new client? The VI client, OK, I'll admit it wasn't fantastic, but I learned how to use it, and it was good enough. And there were really a couple of key reasons we've decided to introduce the new web client. The first is really scale. I promise you I won't use the word cloud. I know that's such a loaded term. But we really are moving into things like cloud scale, where we're saying we're now managing 10,000, 12,000 objects, and the UI needs to be able to follow you there, right? It can't freeze. My favorite, I had a customer tell me, you guys have a white screen of death, where I click on a node, and if I have like 1,000 VMs, I just go out to lunch and come back, right? That's how long it takes for that to render. We fixed that. And that's exactly one of the things that we're focused on with the new web client. But it's not only that. It used to be that there were 10 guys in the back of the shop that were doing the virtualization. That's no longer true. We're talking to customers that have 300-400 concurrent administrative sessions. The client needs to be able to scale to that, too, without bringing VC to its knees. And so that was really a key goal with the web client. The second is extensibility. I talked to all these in great detail, so these are just surface-level things I'm talking about. But we think of ourselves as the center of the virtualization world, but frankly, you tell us truthfully that we're not, that we have a lot of partner solutions that you need with you on day one to manage your data center. And we don't want those to be afterthoughts. We want them to be just as integrated into the UI as we are. They are key to what you do, and we don't want them to be a tab that you have to go to all the way at the end and find a second-level tab, and we hide them in the basement. They're really front and center along with us. And third, frankly, it's just performance, right? I've talked to enough of you to know you don't love the VI client for performance, and we've really, really fixed that with this. And we'll talk about that. But I think the key takeaway from the web client should be this is becoming the new face of what we call the cloud infrastructure suite. Today, it's vSphere and a couple of other solutions, but you'll start to see every solution at VMware, especially administrative solutions, start to integrate into the new face of the UI. And everything will be living side by side and seamless. So enough with the fluffy marketing slides. Let's really get into it. I wanted to talk through a couple of use cases. I wanted to deep dive into a couple of interesting use cases and how the web client really helps. So now I have my web client. What a pretty shade of blue that is. I log in, and for those of you who are used to the client, this should hopefully not be too frightening for what you see here. All the features that were in the what we call the C# client or the VIC client are here. And it looks very similar, and that's really a key tenet to what we had to do here. The goal was, why change things if they work? Don't reinvent things for the sake of reinventing things. We're not Apple cool. Let's not try to do that. But where things were broken or we could improve things, that's exactly what our goal was to do, right? And so you'll see we still have the 3 panels. Maybe one is not on the bottom anymore. It's still on the right. but you should have a very instinctive feel of how to get to where you want to go. Right? So I want to walk through a use case, and this is slightly simulated, but it is 2 clicks, I promise you. I want to show how we walk through a use case of saying, I want to get to where I want to go much faster. So the use case, let's take a use case where I want to find a specific VM with the name San Francisco, right? San Francisco VM. Previously, you would have to know what data center it's in, what cluster it's in, what host it's in, and click, 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 click all the way down. What we've introduced with 5.1 is this idea of the inventory list. The inventory list, we still have the traditional trees, so if you like to click, 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 you can still do that. Those are still there. But what I think you'll find, and we see with customers when they use it, they love the idea that they can now jump by object into exactly where they want to go. Right? I know I want a VM. I don't want to click through 17 things to get there. I just want to click to the VM. So in this case, we're going to show the inventory list. You can click on the vCenter servers. When you get there, that was the first click. And you get there, you see the second, you'll see on the left-hand here, it's highlighted in blue, virtual machines. Right? You're able to click on virtual machines. And so I realized, I said this is simulated. There are 50 VMs, not 500 VMs. But the idea is now you see your San Francisco VM there, right? That you're now able to, within 2 clicks, get to exactly the object you're looking for. And that really is the goal of the web client. The client is to say, spend less time managing and more time actually doing the work you want to do. So this is San Francisco VM. So you're going to say, OK, mate, that was a really set-up example. You made it so convenient that you could get to that exactly. I wanted to give you that same example, but on a much larger scale, right? One of the new paradigms, it's always been there, but we've made it much better with this new web client, is search. Right? That everyone is now moving to a Google model. Nobody organizes data as they used to. Now they want to be able to just type in, get suggestions, and move to exactly where they want to go. And that's exactly what we've done with this. So in the 5.1 client, we now have introduced look ahead, or type ahead. So as you're typing, if you can see the box over there, I'll highlight it. As I start typing San Francisco, the UI now makes suggestions for me by object. So it says, OK, these are the things that are starting to lead to where you want to go. And if you wanted to find it in data stores or virtual machines, you can do that. So here you can see clearly my VM, I see it in the virtual machine. I can click on it directly from there and get dropped into the object itself. It is now a key focus. So this is no clicks. Right? The idea that if you have an awareness of any kind of data, it doesn't have to be name, it can be any property, it can be tagging, and we'll get to that in a minute. You can start to find your object by key characteristics. So now I'm logged into the San Francisco UI, or the VM. I'm focused on this object. One of the other key things we've tried to do is make it very consistent to find the data you're looking for. Right? So you need to know when you're on a host or a VM or a cluster or widget from a partner where you're going to find the monitoring information, the management information. The key is that it should be very easy to know where to go to manage this. Right? So if you're faced with something new, from let's say we have introduced a new solution and it's plugged in here, you know exactly how to manage that. And the third one that I want to point out here, and this is key, is related objects. So traditionally, things with VMware do fit into a hierarchy model, right? I know that hosts belong to clusters and VMs belong to host. But lots of times, and we don't anticipate this being true as we go forward, there are just relationships that you need to be able to find. So if I were to click on related objects for this VM, I can now see everything that's related to this VM. I can see all the templates that are associated with it, any vApps that this happens to be running with, any clusters it's associated with, any networks it's associated with. You get to see all of these relationships. Why did we do this? The key value of doing this is troubleshooting and triaging problems, right? The idea is that, OK, this VM is down. What else is down? What else is suffering that I have no idea about? And you can do exactly that. Come into the VM, see the relationships, and see the status of those things. So you're able to diagnose and triage much faster. At least that's what we're putting on the marketing brochure. So one of the other things I want to talk about, this is relatively new with the web client, is this idea of pause. We don't call it pause. That's what I just wanted to. So this is the idea that we know you as admins are highly interrupt-driven. I was watching an admin the other day. I spent the day with him. He didn't get to finish any single task that he started. It felt like he was a father of a one-year-old. He didn't get to do anything he really wanted to do. He was so interrupt-driven, he would say, Amit, it would be really great if I could fix this problem. And we did do that for him, actually. So the key here is, this is a simple example, but I'm editing a host profile. My boss comes to my desk and says, that VM is on fire. Go figure out why it's on fire. Previously, with the VI client, what did you have to do? You already know you had to either open up another session, bring more load on VC, or you have to cancel your wizard, which is the most frustrating thing when you're on step 37 of 40. Right? Here we've introduced, I don't know if you can see, I've highlighted the box over there. Clearly I should have made this brighter. But the idea is now you can take this task and pause it, and it's there for you. You can go do whatever else you want, and you can come back to that task whenever you want. And because that task is saved server-side, not client-side, for those of you who have to work from home sometimes, you can go home, eat dinner, and then come back online and restart the workflow exactly from where you were just by double-clicking. And if anything has changed since you had started the workflow, it alerts you to where that change was. You can go back and make that change. So if you're provisioning a VM and a data store is no longer available, it says that this wizard is not valid, the data store is not there. You're now able to go back and fix and make those changes as you wish. Thank you. Thank you. The other key, and I know this partners get excited by this, but I wanted to showcase this for you guys because I think you'll see a lot of cool things that'll start to come out of this. Extensibility is a very broad story. We have like whole hour-long sessions dedicated to it, but I did want to focus on two things. We now offer inventory extension and action extension. So you're going to say, okay, Amit, what does that really, really mean to me? The idea here is that we now are telling our partners, integrate cleanly with us, right? If I want to take an SRM action, I should be able to go click on the object and do exactly that. If I shouldn't have to go to that tab and start that process over again. If a partner wants to introduce a chassis or a server or a storage box, they're able to do that, and you're able to treat that as a first-class object, right? So what we are saying to you, and you need to say to our partners too, is we use you every day. You're part of our daily workflow. Integrate because VMworld thinks they're the center of our world, but we need to have other people that are in there with us. And so that's exactly what the key with extensibility is. And so you're going to say, okay, I mean, who do you really have? Some startups? No, we actually have the big names. By the end of the year, we'll have plugins from all of these guys. So you'll be able to manage your storage boxes, your server boxes, your vBlocks, whatever they happen to be.
And others are coming as well. So.
Of course, yeah. We're never done. Thanks, Justin. Oh, thanks, Austin Powers.
Yeah, baby.
So I also wanted to touch on the architecture because obviously from desktop to VMworld, the architecture changes. And you're going to tell me, oh, I have to install an app server now as opposed to doing it on a desktop client. There are actually many advantages to doing this, right? For end users, we are finally offering platform independence. I visit so many Linux shops where people curse me when they say, you make me have one Windows box to run the admin client, but everything else is Linux. I hate that. Now, anywhere a browser runs, our client will work. The other key is with the app server tier, right, for administrators, this offers a lot of value. Scale becomes a lot better. You're now able to just drop in another Tomcat server, which is what the backend is here, Virgo server, and you're able to scale to more administrators. The other key here is that you guys now have centralized control over partner extensions. If you want to have A partner and not B partner, you control that. You drop that into the app server tier. It shows up on our end user customers, but they don't have control of that anymore. You guys do. The second thing that happens here is that you can also control that by permissions, right? So now you're able to do all of these things. And lastly, I talked to a customer that had 400 administrators. They said, when you introduce a new client, I have to go make sure everyone updates it across all 400 machines. We'll update the app server. Anybody who logs in now has the new client. So now we're completely set. So I hope I'm convincing you, but I know there are so many skeptics. I've met all of you, or many of you. I know you're skeptical. Let me walk through a couple of performance data to show that maybe there is a reason to upgrade. The first one, and we have the characteristics of the tests that we ran here, but I got this from the performance benchmarking test that we ran internally. Previously, when you would run the traditional VI client, the C# client, with 100 concurrent sessions, you consumed 50% of the VC box, right? I don't need to tell you guys, you've noticed the difference with VC. It comes to its knees when we run just 100 sessions, right? So that's... With the web client, we're able to run, this is from the performance team now, you're able to run 300 sessions concurrently with only 25% load on the VC. So you're seeing a massive scale and a less footprint on the VC. That all has to do with that app server layer we talked about. We're offloading a lot of the work that's going on there, and we're making VC just more stable. This just goes right back into the idea of saying, VC is critical to your business, we know it, and we want to make sure that we don't bring it down by our own mistakes. So if I have not yet convinced you, I'm going to use the final nail in the coffin. The VI client is gone after this release. We're just making sure that...
I think that deserves a round of applause.
I thought I heard a boo, but yeah. The key is that we're pushing the web client as already it's the primary client. All 5.1 functionality that we're talking about here and through vSphere are exposed only in the web client. But for those of you who want to take the time to make the transition, the VI client will still be there, but it goes away after 5.1. So before I hand this off, I did want to talk briefly about one of my favorite features, which is tagging. right? What is tagging? I'll walk through it briefly. Tagging is allowing you guys to now associate metadata with particular objects. Any vCenter object that's there, you can now assign your own metadata to. So you can say Amit's VMs, you can say San Francisco Data Center, anything you want, you can do that. And you can use this as a grouping construct, right? And objects, the search mechanism is really the key value the key way to unlock the value of this, right? So we're exposing it to the web client only today. So you're going to say, okay, Amit, that's really similar to custom attributes. Let me get into how that's different. The first thing is tags. Here's an example of how you go into the tags section. You can now assign by VC, create tags, create categories for those tags. So if you want personal tags versus corporate tags, you can do exactly that. Here's an example of, here's the icon. Just go ahead and create a new tag, and you can do that. And so that's great. You can do that to a single object just like you can with custom attributes. I'm trying to build up here because most of you are saying, oh, this is really obvious. But there is a value that we're trying to unlock here, and I'm going to unveil it at the end here. The idea is now you can do it across multiple objects. So you can have the same tags across multiple objects. Everything that's a finance VM could be tagged as a finance VM. All 200 VMs that I manage can be tagged as Amit's VMs. And this is not just VMs. I'm using that as an example. You can now bulk add those things. So the question becomes, what is the real value of this? Can I just take a quick question? How many of you hate that you can only put an object into one folder? Okay, we're fixing that problem for you with tags. So here's an example where we say, okay, these are my New York City data center VMs. These are my finance VMs. Which folder do I put these two cross ones in? Previously, you had to pick or choose. You had to have a favorite parent or a favorite child, right? The key is now you can tag these things and isolate. You can't find those. You can't put those into multiple folders, right? But by creating tags of these things, you're now able to add multiple tags to these VMs. You can now go through and search and say, show me the intersection of the New York City VMs that are running finance workloads, and it should show up right away. Right? So the idea is we're freeing you from the folder hierarchy. Folders are still there. We're not getting rid of folders. But we're now freeing you from this rigid hierarchical structure of what folders offer, and we're really adding that, unleashing that with tags. So the key here is, okay, you said that's very similar to what custom attributes do today. You're right in some ways. Custom attributes will continue to exist, and they'll coexist with tags in 5.1. But as you can, we're giving you a clue here. We're going to give you an opportunity to one-time migrate those. This is not like a salesman, buy now or never buy. But the idea is that you can now migrate your custom attributes directly into categories and tags, and you're now on the new world. And just to put not too fine a point on this, clearly custom attributes are legacy, where tags are the future. And we're going to unleash a lot of value in future releases with tags, which we can't do with custom attributes. So you'll start to see custom attributes fade away. So, like I said, I was the brains. I'll give it to the pretty face here to go talk to very techie slides.
Hey, thanks, Amit. So we talked about the UI and the new service called tagging. We've also introduced another new service called the vCenter single sign-on, but I'll just call it SSO for the rest of this discussion. Right? So I'll just jump through. So why did we introduce this new service? Right? It's just another new thing. Is it like to add additional hassles to your life as an administrator? Well, not so. What happened was that we started off with one management piece of software, which was vCenter, but slowly we've added a whole bunch of other solutions like vCloud, vShield, vCOps, vCM, all of these pieces. And what was happening is that every piece had this little blob of code that talked to Active Directory. And so if you were using our solutions, everywhere you would have to go and configure the connection to an identity source and things like that. So one of the important tenets of user management is to manage it in as few places as possible. Right? So we want to move from this model where in every piece of our solution, you connect to AD separately to a kind of a single service that handles all of the identity management related to our infrastructure, right? And as well as our partner solutions that integrate with the cloud infrastructure suite. So it's less administrative overhead. You go to one place to connect to your identity repositories. Less of a security issue because there's just one place where things can go wrong and can be fixed as opposed to multiple places, right? So that's one. The other thing was that today, any solution that is part of our infrastructure essentially has the same privileges as vCenter. When a solution registers as an extension with vCenter, they have essentially the same privileges as vCenter does. And going forward, maybe we don't want to do that, right? Some solutions want to do a certain unique piece of task that does not need to have all kinds of privileges that vCenter has. So before we kind of do that, we wanted to introduce the notion of a solution identity. So humans have identities, that's your administrators, and each solution in our world also has identities. And all of these identities are kind of authenticated, and the sessions are managed by this SSO service, right? And one advantage of that is that you get to know who is doing what on behalf of whom. Let's say you're vC orchestrator, and you start vC orchestrator goes to vCenter to orchestrate certain tasks. And so vC orchestrator is going to talk to vCenter as vC orchestrator, the solution identity. And it says, hey, I'm trying to orchestrate this create VM on behalf of user foo. So in the logs, you'll see that foo initiated something in orchestrator, and then orchestrator tried to do something on vCenter. So we believe that for a lot of our customers who are very security conscious and trying to figure out who initiated what action and who tried to log in and things like that, you'll get better audit records in terms of which identity was trying to do what. So in terms of what the single sign-on server is and how it looks like, so it's a service. It's essentially it's an application, a web application, right? It is not a replacement for your corporate identity. It's not a replacement for your Active Directory. It works. It uses your existing sources of identity as is, right? So it's the service that can draw users either from Active Directory. We've also added support for Open LDAP. And not only that, we had this problem where vCenter could connect to only one AD domain at any given point in time. With this, you can connect to multiple AD domains at the same time. Not only that, if you have a setup where some users live in the local operating system, you can actually point SSO to those users as well. So it draws users from those. So the other thing that happens is, if you want to, if you don't have an AD setup, or you're trying this out in a lab where you don't want to connect this to your corporate AD or things like that, single sign-on comes with a database. It points to the same database as vCenter does. And you have the option of creating what we call local users and groups. So these users and groups are maintained by SSO. They live in this database. Right? So that's the other kind of capability that's there. And single sign-on, the service is kind of based on industry standards. It exposes WS Trust and WS Security. And the session tokens that are generated are SAML 2.0 tokens. So these are kind of industry standard for identity federation and things like that. So, well, you might ask, how does this affect me? And, let's kind of look at that. So if you look at, vCenters of the past, every time you logged into vCenter, you had to specify the IP address of the VC that you're connecting to. If you look at the web client, there's no IP address required. You just point your browser to the web client. You're essentially logging into your security domain. So that's the one immediate kind of outcome of integrating with a single sign-on. And the next thing you see is once you log in, you get to see all of the vCenters that you have permissions on. So let's say...
Wait. Did you say all of vCenters that I have permission to?
Yes, all
so
vCenters.
How many people out there use link mode today? You like it or not like it? Kind of mixed?
All right. Yeah,
so the vSphere web client with SSO will allow you to manage a single pane of glass over multiple vCenters. I think that on its own is a round of applause.
Not linked.
So we will go to the deployment model that supports this. But maybe on these two vCenters, in one of them you are a super user, on the other one you just have the ability to power on a few VMs. You get to see those two. Your boss maybe has access to 7 of them, so he gets to see 7. Right? And if you want to see the 5.0 vCenters here, you need to do a one-time registration, and those 5.0 vCenters also show up on this pane of glass. Right? So you do not need linked mode to get a view across all your vCenters. But you still need linked mode for sharing of roles and licenses. As far as administration, so the first thing, there's one thing I forgot to kind of put on the slide out here. So with SSO now, you have 2 types of users. You have the VI admin, and you have the SSO admin. Now, the same person could have both of these identities, but there are 2 separate kind of roles out here. And if you want to perform administrative actions on the single sign-on thing, there are two administrative actions that you perform. One is configuration, where this is the place where you connect SSO to your identity backend, to your AD domains, to LDAP, to local OS, and things like that. So that's the tab you'd go to, the menu item you'd go to configure that part. And then the other thing is if you choose to create local users and groups, that's the place you'd go to create local users and groups. And by the way, that's the place also where solution identities are maintained. So in order to do these things, you have to don the SSO admin kind of role. So out of the box, when you install SSO, you get this admin user account called admin at system domain, and you can log in and create many more user IDs with that role. So how does SSO work? I have a slide out here. So as I said, everything out here is based on secure token exchange, secure exchange of SAML tokens. So you have vCenter single sign-on pointing to Active Directory. Web client and the user tries to log in with a user ID password. The web client requests a token. vCenter, the single sign-on authenticates to Active Directory, and if the authentication is successful, then it comes back with a token. And then the web client talks to vCenter or Orchestrator or vShield or vCloud using that token. So that's how you get the single sign-on, right? So that's how it works. So now we've talked about the web client, single sign-on, tagging, and at the beginning, Amit showed you kind of a picture of multiple moving parts. Before it was just vCenter, now we have multiple moving parts. So let's look at how installation and deployment is affected because of all these moving parts, right? So as I said before, you had to download and install vCenter. You downloaded the web client, and then you were good to go. Well, now you have the vCenter single sign-on, you have the inventory service, you have the core VC, and you have the web client. When I say that, I mean the application server corresponding to the web client, right? So that's one way if you're deploying on Windows. If you use the server appliance, then the appliance comes with all of these four kind of services inside one. So let's look at so for the appliance, you just import the OVF, you power it up, and you're good to go, right? For the Windows installation, the order of install, so this is very important. The first piece that needs to be installed and up and running is the single sign-on piece, because all of the other components actually point to that one, and so that's very important. So if you're upgrading, then as part of the upgrade, first single sign-on would be installed, and then the other pieces would be upgraded. So that's the install and upgrade.
And you can upgrade directly from 4.0, 4.1, or 5.0 with this process as well. So.
Okay. All right. That's good. So this is a screenshot from the install. We call this auto run, I believe. Yeah. So because there are four things to install, we thought there will be a lot of scenarios where you just want to install all of these things in one shot. So there is a simple install option where in one shot you can install the single sign-on, the inventory service, and vCenter, and then install the web client, the app server, in the next kind of the next step. So when would you want to do this? If you plan to install SSO, IS, and vCenter on the same VM, then you should use this particular the simple install mode. You could use the customized installation where you choose when to install what, and that option should be used if you're deploying all of these pieces on different VMs, and that would be a deployment mode. We'll talk about that. If you are deploying single sign-on in HA or multi-site mode, if you want to point multiple vCenters to the same SSO instance. So one other thing, the single sign-on service not only does session management and authenticating users against AD, in it is also embedded what we call a lookup service, which essentially is a registry. All of our components register with this lookup service. So when you install SSO, the next step when you install vCenter, you'll notice in every installation there will be this one window where you need to kind of register vCenter or inventory service to the lookup service. So that's one of the reasons why you need to install SSO first. And the way things work is, all of these solutions don't know directly about the endpoint of any other piece. So if vCenter wants to talk to the inventory service, it's going to ask the lookup service to give it an endpoint. So that's how things find each other, and that's why it's very important that you are aware of this kind of stuff. So let's look at some of the deployment scenarios. So this is the most common, the simplest deployment scenario, right? You deployed one vCenter before, now you deploy one of each, and you're good to go. And depending on whether you deploy all of these in a single VM or in multiple VMs, you'd use the simple installer or the customized installation. If you were using Heartbeat to kind of make vCenter highly available, now Heartbeat can be used to protect all of the other moving parts as well. And so that's another deployment option where all of these are kind of protected by Heartbeat.
And just to be clear on that, the single license of Heartbeat will cover all components, whether on the same server or distributed across several servers. So you won't need a server for each individual license for each individual server. Okay. And that's new with version 6.5 that will ship the same time as 5.1 of vCenter.
Right. So remember we showed you that screen where you could see, when you logged in, you could see multiple vCenters on the same web client. The way to get that behavior going is to point all of the vCenter and inventory instances to the same single sign-on service. Okay, so that would be another deployment mode. And one of the things that Amit mentioned, and I kind of forgot to mention when we were talking about that slide is, remember he showed that when you can search and you can do look ahead and things like that on a single vCenter. If all of the vCenters were connected to the same SSO as shown in that window, you can actually search across all the vCenters. So if you're looking for Joe's VMs and those VMs are spread across 5 vCenters, you'd actually get the result from, the search would be federated and you'd get a result from all of the 5 vCenters. So I think that's we believe is pretty powerful, right? Especially if you're trying to find a needle in a haystack scenario, right? So this is one deployment model. The other one is, so if you're not using Heartbeat, and to protect your vCenters, but you have this, you're thinking like, hey, my users need to be able to log in to do administration, so the single sign-on service better be up and running all the time. SSO can be run in HA mode, it'd be fronted by a load balancer, essentially. Multiple, single sign-on. It's a stateless service, so you have multiple of these fronted by a load balancer, and you point all of these as you register every service or vCenter, you just point to the load balanced IP. And so you're running SSO in HA mode. As long as one of them is up and running, all users will be able to authenticate, right? So that's another, we believe that will be a fairly popular mode of deployment. Let's look at this other one. So if you have data centers that are spread across multiple geographies, so you have an AD domain controller in site 1 and another AD domain controller in site 2, and so what you do is you set up an SSO in site 1, you point it to your local AD domain controller. You set up an SSO in site 2, you point it to the local AD domain controller there, and you can join those two SSOs in what we call multi-site mode. And what happens is you can manually what's it called? Sync config information and things like that. Now, if you deployed in this model, if you point your browser to the web client that's running in New York, you will only see the vCenters in New York. If you point your web client running in Fairfax, you'll see the vCenters there. If you want to see both of them, then you need to use linked mode. So across sites, if you want to see both the vCenters, you need to use linked mode. So that's the only time when, for views, you need to see linked mode. And then this is the other one, which is you can have multi-site and SSO running on HA in each site, essentially. Okay, so that was about installation and deployment. So the last but not the least is vCenter performance. So now that there are multiple moving parts, we just can't, when we say performance, we just cannot say the performance of vCenter, right? There is the performance of the web client. Then there's the performance of core vCenter, the database, and the inventory service, and things like that. And then, there's this new kid on the block, single sign-on, and you might have questions about how does that perform, right? So Amit spoke to you about, the web client, the performance of the web client, and how it's improved a lot over how C# is to perform. So I just want to add a few more notes out here. So one of the reasons for this improvement in performance and the fact that vCenter spends less horsepower serving up the needs of the client is because of this thing called the inventory service, right? And because we keep on talking about this inventory service, but we never really explain what it is or what it does. The inventory service is essentially a cache of all of the objects that vCenter stores. So all the VMs, hosts, resource pools, clusters, all of that information is stored in the inventory service as well. And they are in sync with the actual objects that live in the VC database. And what we found is 70% of the requests that come to the client are reads. And the inventory service is designed to support reads better than vCenter would be. So anytime a request comes for reads, it is kind of directed to the inventory service. And when some action needs to be performed, some operation needs to be performed, like power on a VM or add a host or do something like that, that's when requests are directed to VC. So that's one reason. The second thing that's happened is the web client is actually, compared to the C# client, it's more of a lazy loading thing. Unless the user refreshes, it's not going to go and make a hop to the server to find state. I mean, that's not to say that when you power on a VM, you're not going to immediately see the state of the VM being powered on. You'll see that, but the C# client had this thing. It constantly had to be updated by vCenter on the latest state of the backend, infrastructure, but that's not the case. So that's another reason why VC wastes less horsepower on serving the client. Right? So those are the two things. In terms of single sign-on, we've tested it, stress tested it, and this is the numbers, 30 logins per second we'll support, and 10,000 logins per hour on average. And we believe that should be able to address the regular authentication needs that administrators have. So single sign-on performance should not come in the way of running your data center. So let's look at the performance improvements in vCenter and the database and things like that. So one of the major sources of data, or the largest subset of data that is stored in the vCenter database relates to stats. It's more than 50% of the data. And there were some performance issues related to how stats were being handled. And we believe that by fixing the stats-related problems in the database, we will improve the overall performance of the database and hence improve the overall performance of vCenter. So that was with one motivation a lot of our performance guys started doing this work. And so let's see what are the things we did, right? So what are the stats operations we do? Well, we insert stats, we roll up stats into new granularities, and then you purge stats when they get old, right? So in each of these things, we've made improvements. And the most fundamental improvement, the changes that has happened is instead of a single big honking database, we've created a lot of partition database tables, right? And so when you insert into smaller partitions, the other partitions are not affected. And so there's less lock contention and things like that. So inserts have become really faster. Right? Again, during rolling up, there are no collisions. The partition where you're doing the roll-up is not the partition where new stats are being added, right? So there's no collision there. And second one, previously when purges used to happen, you do a select all, find out from the tuple whether it was purgeable or not, and then purge it. And so that was, you can imagine how intense, CPU intensive that was, CPU and IO intensive that was. So now what you do is, that one of those partitions are flagged to be purged. You just drop that table. So pretty much it's order of one in terms of complexity, right? So the result is very dramatically reduced I/O operations, right? At very fast roll-up times, and the roll-up procedure has become much more predictable. So now, as a result of that, we're able to support stats at scale, at 10K VMs, 10,000 VMs, 1,000 hosts, right? And the roll-up performance. So if you were a customer who wanted to do roll-up every half an hour, and the roll-up process itself took more than half an hour. Your roll-ups would be backed up, right? So now roll-ups take minutes and not hours. So it is always the case, no matter whether you're at stats level 4 or stats level 2. Anytime you want to do a stats roll-up, it will finish before you start doing the next roll-up. And then if you're some very large customers with very large setup of inventory, often reported certain gaps in stats sometimes, that is now 0. There are no gaps in your stats. Whether you're recording at stats level 4 or 1 through 4, anywhere, there are no gaps. So we believe as a result of all of this, there's a much better database performance, and then there's much better vCenter performance. So on the client side, because of the way the client sends out requests to the server, the way the server handles requests from the client, the insertion of this inventory service, which is a cache, and this database improvement, all of these taken together, I think, significantly improve the performance of the vCenter platform. And you will notice this no matter at what scale you're running the system. And one other piece of data. So because we have multiple moving parts, you might ask, hey, you've given me like 4 services before there was 1. So we did a study, and if you take the combined CPU utilization, it's still 85% of the kind of the older version. Right? So that's all we had. We hope that the features that we've put in place, you'll like it and you'll upgrade, and you'll be able to run your data center better. So it's time for kind of questions and Q&A, and we have 2 mics out there. If you could please step to the mic and ask the questions, that way everybody can hear them. Thank you. And